Now we have our featured speaker, Rachel. I've really enjoyed getting to know this very special woman who's overflowing with warmth and positivity. Rachel's experience and expertise comes from the trenches. She dated for 14 years with hundreds of men, and she'll probably talk about that. But she's used her experience together with her wisdom to counsel singles and their parents nationally and internationally. She's a professional dating coach and has lectured and coached countless people of all ages on their dating journey. So we're delighted that she agreed to speak with us this evening, and I would like to give her all the time that she can. So I'd like to hand it over to Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and the Shidduch spot. Can you hear? Am I unmuted properly? Okay, good. Yes? Okay, good. It is a deep honor and privilege to be here with you tonight and to be able to share some things that we as a collective community can do to help our singles. So I guess we'll kind of jump right in and get started since the night is short. So I've condensed it down to really 5 tips that I want to give over for singles and mainly for parents and the community to really help our singles out. Okay, so the first one we're going to start with is mindset. Okay, what kind of mindset are we helping our singles in when they're beginning to date, right? We want to make sure that they're ready. So very often I get asked about, all my daughter's friends are dating. Should she start dating, right? Everyone's dating. I'm feeling this pressure. My neighbor's kid get engaged, my cousin, my aunt, all these other people are marrying off kids and I'm feeling the pressure. Is it the right time for my child? And really, it's important to make sure that your child is specifically ready for being married, for sharing their life with somebody else, for having children, because very often that does come together, right? And making sure that they're in the right mindset in terms of how they're going to date. And readiness is a very, very important component. And if you feel your child isn't ready, then just kind of going along with what society tells you might not be the best choice for you and your child. And I think it's very important that, just a basic chinuch al pi darko, parents are there to help their children make those appropriate decisions as they happen. I have this little exercise that I'll give to a client where I'll say, I'm going to say a word and you tell me what words give me 3 adjectives that come to mind when I say a word, right? I'll say marriage or I'll say children. And very often I'll hear marriage, I'll hear pain, suffering, shalom bias issues, scary, okay? Children, I'll hear exhausting, annoying, expensive, right? So when you have people that are going into dating or into the thought of having a family with this mindset, then even though they technically really want to be married and they know that they should be married and they in theory want a family, when those are those kind of thoughts that are running through their head on a daily basis, it's very, very hard for them to actually take those steps forward. So that's part of being ready and not necessarily going along with the tide, but making sure that they are in that right mindset. In addition to that, let's say career, right? There are certain people, I know that I'm speaking to a very wide audience here, and there are certain people that, have grown up with career really being a focus. So for instance, I have someone who is in the middle of taking her LSATs and she's studying feverishly and her parents are pressuring her to start dating. And she's like, I'm just not in the right headspace. I really want to finish my LSATs before I actually start dating. I'm not expecting to finish law school, but I do want to finish taking my LSATs that are coming up in the next couple of months. Right. So to be mindful that if there's a goal for some people that doesn't supersede marriage, but in the moment, they would have more kind of calm yishuv adas, knowing that they've finished that exam and they're able to move forward in dating, then we should work together with them to make sure that we can help them date from a calm, positive place as opposed to a pressured place. Part of mindset is also a lot of fantasy of what marriage actually is and the reality of what marriage actually turns out to be. Right now, the beautiful thing about fantasy that people are attracted to is that fantasy can be whatever you want, right? The sky is the limit. And in a sense, fantasy is a huge bracha because it gives us hope. So for singles out there, when there is no date in sight, I can dream about the guy that will show up and the family that will embrace me and the home that I will have and the children that I will have. And that kind of keeps us going. The detriment to that is that sometimes we get stuck in that fantasy mindset. And when a guy comes along who could be wonderful, who can meet many of our needs, but isn't exactly fantasy because who is, right? Then it creates a boundary and kind of a hurdle for someone to get over because wait a second, he's not exactly my fantasy, right? And so helping our children be able to get through what is the difference between fantasy and reality and what we can actually expect in a healthy home is really, really helpful in terms of preparing them for that next move, okay? A lot of times I'll ask a single, tell me a little bit about what kind of guy you're looking for. And when they tell me what they're looking for, I never hear a negative quality, which is so strange because I thought we're marrying human beings. And I thought that human beings are flawed, including, myself. So when I don't hear any flaws, it makes me worry about, how is it that, we're still dating from this place of fantasy and we haven't quite gotten up to the reality, and how we can help our children in that mindset. Exposure, right? We all want our children to get married. We want people to set them up. But then there's kind of this push and pull about how comfortable we are with them being exposed. Do we want them to go to singles event? Do we want people to see their resume? Do we want people to see their picture? I'm not getting into any of that right now, but we are very, very kind of tight on how much exposure we want them to have. By the same token, we have to also understand that if there is no exposure, how are people going to know of them, right? Word of mouth only takes us so far. And it is important for people to meet them, whether or not it's a shadchan, whether or not it's a singles event. And obviously everyone is dealing with their comfort zone of what they're comfortable with. But we want to make sure that we are helping them kind of move forward in that mindset of a little bit of exposure is necessary. Yes, it's uncomfortable sometimes meet a shadchan. You don't know, but it is important, okay? Okay, resilience, right? I'm not ready to be hearing rejection. I'm not ready to be hearing a no, right? Is your child capable of hearing a no and their self-esteem is able to absorb that? I think that's a really important quality. I like to say this, it's pretty obvious, but apparently it's important to hear this. We only marry one person. By definition of that, we will say no and we will be said no to by every other potential match, right? I know that doesn't sound comfortable, but it does allow us to take that one special relationship and raise it and build it to the level at which we would like to have a home. Therefore, getting so hurt and so insulted and falling apart when people get a no, which is I deal with a lot. I see a lot of people that can't move forward. I just can't, if I hear one more no, if one more person says no to me before they even meet me, right? These are things where the self-esteem can't actually handle it. And in my mind, someone may not be ready to even be dating. They might need to take a couple weeks break until they're in that healthy mindset of, it's okay. I'm not going to be the flavor that meets everybody's needs. And they won't be the flavor that meets my needs. And that's okay. If he said no, that's a message from Hashem. Time to move on, time to move forward. Let's not waste time for finding the right person. And that's really the healthiest message when people are able to, in a healthy way, dust themselves off and move forward. Okay, so that's that first tip, mindset. Number two, kind of being in the moment with our children. And what I mean by that is, it hit me the other day that my young children, as much as I think they're mine, obviously they're a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but as much as I think they're mine, I really only have them under my roof for a mere, 18, 20 years, and then they're going to fly away, right? It's a very short window of time that you really have the opportunity to day in, day out, have the relationship with that child. And it's so important from a very young age, those of you who have young children, to nurture, to coddle, to build that relationship with good listening, with patience, with hugs, with consolation, with validation, so that when they come to dating, the person they want to come to share that and speak to is you. One of the things that I deal with very often are children who don't want to speak to their parents, either because maybe their parents don't understand them, maybe their parents came from a difficult marriage or divorce, but they don't want to speak to their parents because they don't want to hear their parents' viewpoint, or they don't feel that the relationship is there, that they can be open without judgment. I hear a lot of judgment. And so being able to be there for our children in the moment and building those relationships at a very young age is so crucial, so that when the relationship needs that there's a basic comfortable communication, that is in place. And I really, really stress this a lot. So for instance, a mom who told me, well, I can't take her to that weekend or that Pesach or that Sukkot event. I can't let my friends see that my child is so overweight. No one's going to ever read her a Shidduch, right? And the child has heard her say this. I know I've heard this from the child themselves. So how do you think the child feels when even the mother is embarrassed to show her in public? You think that child feels confident? about who she is? No, she feels like she wants to hide. Is going into a relationship like that coming from a healthy place? No, she's coming from a place of low self-esteem. Why would anybody like me? Why would anyone want to date me? I guess I'll just take the bottom of the barrel because who would want me anyway? That's so disheartening. That's so painful. That's so unhealthy to go into a relationship like that. And so being able to be mindful of comments that we say to our children that they bury deep but are really lie very much right under the surface is crucial to be mindful of. We tend to, without realizing it, put a lot of pressure on our kids, whether or not it's the society that you should be dating now, or pressure of, come on, you're already getting older, or why are you spending so much time with your friends? Why aren't you meeting more shadchanim? Why aren't you dating more? This one got married and that one got married. So this subtle pressure where you and I know that it's coming from a good place, but to a child and an older single, it feels like an attack. It feels like, I guess the way I am isn't good enough because you want me to be married. You want me to have children. Again, we all know that it's coming from a good place, and every parent wants their child's best interest at heart. But being able to, being able to give that message over from a positive way, so the child feels that you have their back and you understand where they're coming from and you want their best interest, I think is really, really important. I recently spoke to a mother who was researching a boy for her child, and I do a lot of coaching for parents, and she was speaking to this Rebbe, and I guess the Rebbe said something where maybe the boy is a good boy and maybe he knows how to learn, but Be'in is not quite his thing. Learning Gemara really deeply inside is not quite his thing, right? And so she didn't know what to do. What is she going to do? Her child's not going to say yes to this boy, right? And my response is, why are we telling her this? There are so many good qualities about him. This is a girl who's not looking for a full-time learner. She's looking for somebody who's going to support her comfortably. She wants to make sure that she has financial safety. She wants to make sure that he makes time for learning, but she's not looking for the next Rosh Hashiva. So why is this important, right? And the mother wasn't mindful of why it would be necessary to not say that comment, right? Being smart in order to help our children. We're not advocating lying to your children, but being smart where you know this child and what they need. And she has another child who wants to marry a full-time learner. To that child, it might make a little bit more of a difference, right? But once a child hears, oh, maybe he doesn't know how to learn, maybe he's not smart, right? Which wasn't even the case, that already can plant doubt in a child. So just being mindful of how this is being received by our children. The comments that we all hear, you're so picky, do you even want to get married? No, come on, is anything doing, right? All these comments that come from society and kind of seep into the home are all things that kind of put that pressure. And even after our children get married, we want to make sure that that relationship is there, that when I needed you most, you were there, you didn't judge me, you didn't attack me, you validated my feelings, you were present when I needed it most, when I was going through the toughest times. That is what really helps to build that relationship long-term, not just short-term. Okay, number 3 is very, very important and a little bit difficult to discuss, but I do think it's very important to discuss. I don't personally believe that we have a singles crisis. I believe that we have, unfortunately, a breakdown of the family unit crisis. And let me explain. Majority of the people that I speak to, and I'm not going to say all, but a majority of the people that I speak to fall into 3 categories. And it's these 3 categories that I find struggle the most when it comes to Shidduch. A, children who come from divorce. Divorce is scary. Divorce is unpredictable. Because it happened once, it's not so uncomfortable to hear the word and maybe have that happen again. And divorce left a lot of scars in many children. And so a lot of children feel that as much as they might have a good relationship with their parents, they're scared to go to their parents for this kind of thing because it didn't work out so well for them. Okay. Number 2, parents who are happily married, or it seems that way from the outside, but living in the home, there is constant conflict, there's fighting, there's yelling, there's disrespect, and a child picks up on that and deep down has this voice that says, which I've heard many times from singles, why do I need that? Why do I even need that in my life? Why would I want that? I mean, who needs that pain anyways, right? I think that I would be much better off on my own. Now, even though they really do want to be married, they're kind of one foot on the gas and one foot on the pedal, on the brake, where they want to be married, but then there's that voice of like, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself through that kind of pain? And I think that it's very, very sad to see that. And a lot of the work that I do is helping work through that so we can actually move forward in dating. The third category is obviously very unfortunate and to nobody's fault, but there's a loss of a spouse, and a child grew up in a home where there just wasn't a marriage because there was a single parent. And obviously this is nobody's fault, but they never got to see that relationship modeled in the healthy way that they should be able to try and, continue that with their own personal relationships. And I want to just say very clearly, very boldly here, that a child who comes from a divorce, a child who comes from an unhappy home, or a child who comes from a single parent can very, very happily be married. I will say this again. Children who come from divorce, difficult homes with parents that are married, or single parent homes can have very, very happy, beautiful marriages. The only caveat I would say is it may not come naturally, and it may be something that has to be learned. Just like a Baal Tshuva doesn't know how to daven and they learn how to read Hebrew, and then they learn how to daven and they can daven and they could be a beautiful davener. In the same respect, somebody who didn't come from a home like that can learn the skills, can observe families that have healthy relationships, and can really build beautiful homes. I have seen with my own eyes even more beautiful, solid homes than your typical home, because they're so determined to build that home for their children that they never had, or to rewrite those wrongs that they were never given as a child. And I have seen many times children build beautiful homes and beautiful marriages. So it's very, very possible, but it really does take a bit more investment of self and mindfulness of, what went on in that home, maybe some therapy, knowing what not to repeat, surrounding yourself by people that have healthy marriages so that you learn the skills that it takes to build a healthy home. So it's very possible, but it definitely is something that people need to be aware of. Even in healthy homes, right? Even in the healthiest homes, if there was one message that I had to give as a takeaway tonight, I would say that even in the healthiest homes, be mindful that what you do in your home, the way you speak to your child, the way you speak to your spouse, the way you resolve conflict, the boundaries that you set or lack of, the way that you, speak to each other in a kind way, the way that you're loving to each other, that is the role model that your child will take as a paradigm for their own marriage. And that puts a lot of responsibility on us. I know it puts a lot of responsibility on me, making sure that the interactions that my children see are healthy ones. Do we make mistakes? We certainly do. But overall, the message that we give is one of love, of connection, of building, of if we make a mistake, we want to work on that together as a happy couple. And even if your child is coming from a divorce or a single home or a single parent, we know that there are skills and tools that we can use to help them to build these relationships as best as they can. Okay, a few more just simple things that we can do in the home is giving healthy social cues and social skills to our children. What about letting our children tantrum sometimes, not get exactly what they want, right? That also plays into training them for how they're going to act as they become growing adults. There are only two types of people that get a parking ticket. Those that say, Gamzu Tova, okay, it happened. I guess Hashem decided I wasn't supposed to have this money. It's so annoying, time to move on. Oh, well. And those people that say, I can't believe I got a parking ticket. I'm going to go fight it. And how dare they? And they can't get it off their mind, right? And a lot of that has to do with the way we resolve conflict at a very young age. So teaching those skills is really, really crucial. Happy parents, happy kids, right? Haven't you seen the happiest kids come from the happiest homes, right? There's music playing in the home, there's dancing, there's laughing, there's giggling, which is obviously the best medicine. That's what really contributes to these happy kids. I hear so often, I'm looking for someone with simchas hachayim. I really want someone who's so happy. But the person I hear on the other line is not a happy person. It's very hard to attract a happy person when you yourself are not that way, right? So being able to put ourselves in that happy, healthy mindset so we can give that over to our children and be able to help them learn from that to bring that into their lives and into their relationships. And the last one in this category is a tough one, but I think it's very important. We all walk around with what I call a core belief. There's this core belief that I carry with me everywhere. If we came from a healthy home, it may be, I'm capable. I'm able to do anything. I'm a happy person. I'm gonna make it happen. A challenge, nothing's too difficult for me. I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna become stronger. I'm gonna work on myself. I'm gonna dive in for it, right? That could be a message that we get in a home. We can also get a core belief of, I'm a loser. I'm not good enough. Who would ever want to marry me anyways? Everything I do falls apart. Everything I do fails. There we go again. Another, knock to the self-esteem. I tried to get into that school. I didn't get in. I got a no from this guy. It always happens. Everything I want, it never happens, right? And that core belief is kind of the background music that plays during our day, during our life. And it plays all day. And we all have to really work on fighting back at it, because if we don't, it doesn't just trickle into our day and our job and it trickles into our relationships and our home and our children. And it's so important to work through that, because if we're not working on that positive core belief, then it will be trickling down to our children, and our children will learn that, and they will learn, how is it that a husband is supposed to treat a wife? How is a wife supposed to treat a husband? How are couples supposed to talk to each other? How are they supposed to resolve, issues that come up and conflicts? So being able to work through that core belief. So very often I meet somebody who's in a very unhealthy relationship, and I'm trying to figure out, how did they get into this very unhealthy place? And very quickly I learned, well, that's how my father talks to my mother. What do you mean? He that's just how it is. That's just how it goes. And my mother just takes it. That's just how it is, right? And so it's no surprise that she attracted a man who talks down to her, and she just takes it. That's just how it is, right? So being able to work through that at an early age and help our children learn the healthy skills modeled by our own marriages or modeled by our own behavior in order to help them in that way. Okay, number 4, marriage is not a hospital. I know this is a shock to many, but so many people come into marriage because, if I'm only married, then I'll be happy. Then I'll feel secure. I'll feel full. I'll feel complete. Then I'll have children and everything will be just perfect. I hear this from people all the time. Unfortunately, the only thing that being married solves is being single. So you won't be single anymore. You may make yourself and someone else miserable if your issues are not worked through. But the only thing that being married actually solves is you won't be single any longer. And so I really encourage singles and parents to sit down with your children, or really think about, what is it that your child may need to work through before they're married. Now, I understand that we're all a work in progress, and we all have work to do on ourselves, and that is clear. But it is important to think about, is my child ready for marriage in a functional capacity? Have I taken them for the mental health counseling or therapy or medication that they need in order to function in a healthy way in society, right? Have I, worked with them on their emotional health? Have I made sure that, physically, if physically they're unhealthy to be married, have I worked through that, right? Making sure that we deal with this before somebody gets married, because doing that during marriage really only becomes a burden, not just on one person, but really on 2 people. And there is a sense of betrayal when somebody comes into a marriage and they didn't know that there was a huge mental health issue, that maybe if they would have found out during dating, they would have said, let's work. I'll be there for you. We'll work through this together. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. We could be perfectly imperfect together, right? That may have happened, but because now they're in a relationship, or because they decided to share this, towards the end of engagement, it threw off the entire relationship and often shakes and cracks the foundation forever. So it's really important to make sure that whether or not people are dealing with addictions, or whether or not somebody's dealing with boundary issues, basic boundary issues, don't hide those issues. Help your child work through them. Help the singles work through them, so that when they go into marriage, they're going with their healthiest foot forward, and they're really able to embrace marriage in the best possible way, which is when 2 healthy people work through their own stuff individually and meet each other. What they can build together is infinitely great, infinitely great. And so we want to set them up for the best possible outcome. And number 5, tefillah. And I can sum up tefillah in the simplest way. My grandfather was in the camps on his way to his death. He was sent, they would send people left to right, and he was sent to be killed. And he was standing in line with 100 men that were also standing to be killed. Ironically, in that line was my other grandfather. They were in the same line together. That's a story for a different time. And what does a person do, chas v'shalom, when they are standing in line to be killed? So he said vidui, he said shema, he said ani mamin, he davened, he did whatever he knew by heart. And he's sitting there and he's still waiting to be shot. And he's thinking, wow, this is a waste of time. I should try to save my life. What are they going to do? Kill me? Okay, well, then at least I tried. I have nothing to lose, literally nothing to lose. So he marches himself up to the head of the line, and happens to be that he had private German lessons as a child and he spoke a very polished German. And he salutes the commander and he says, with all due respect, this line of 100 men, they're not sick. They're just starving. If you give us another piece of bread and a bowl of soup, we'll do whatever you say. But why would you want to throw out 100 men that could actually do work for you? It doesn't actually make sense. Nobody here is sick. We're all starving. So the commander thought about it, and he sent my 2 grandfathers and 98 other people back to the barracks for another bowl of soup and another piece of bread, and that's how he was saved. And this story has become an heirloom in my home, and probably will be for many generations, as the story of, and what was the takeaway that he said? If you don't ask, you don't get. And that is my message to you about tefillah. We want to daven for a single, we have to ask for it. Keep a list in your siddur. If you don't have all their names, be mindful of who they are. I know that I am mindful very often when I'm making challah, when I'm just davening on a daily basis, when I'm mikvah, whatever it is. Be mindful of our singles, to think about them always and ask specifically for what they need, that Hashem should give us the opportunity to help them in the way that they need, to be there for them in the way that they need, so that we can help move them to the next stage of life. And the last little quick tips we're going to go through is really what we can do as a community. Okay, so obviously we want to help our children. As parents, as friends, we want to be there for them. But as a community, what could we do? Okay, so I think one of the big things that was a takeaway for me when I was single is I got up in the morning and I looked in the mirror and I recognized that I was single. And I actually didn't need anyone to remind me, right? So many times we have people say, you really should, move along, or, why are you being so picky? And, and the biological clock is ticking, and she got married and he got married. What do you think? You're waiting for Prince Charming? None of these comments are helpful. I have never met anybody who told me they got married because of a comment like that. If you lose weight, if you dress better, if you said this, if you acted like that, none of these comments are helpful. They are only hurtful. They are only painful. And what it does do is it draws the gap between the single and you further and further. And when you actually do have a good shidduch or a good idea and you want to help them, what they think is, you don't really understand me. You don't really understand what I'm going through and where I'm coming from. I don't really want to hear a shidduch from you, because what you want to do is attack me for why you think I'm single. But maybe if I told you about the guy that I dated who was rude, or the person that I dated that I was very unattracted to, or the person that I dated that was completely hashkafically not compatible, maybe you'd understand why I'm saying no, or why he's saying no. But instead you judge me. And a person who's judging me, I don't feel like I can really ask you for any help, because you're just not really understanding where I'm coming from. And it drives that gap larger and larger away from the connection that we really want to have with our singles, so that our singles are able to work with us together and we can see what we can do to help them. Which brings me to my next thing, which might be an area in which we can help our singles. How can I help you? You're so wonderful. You're so smart. You're so capable. Point out the areas not dating. Point out the areas in their life that they are a success. I read your article last week. It was brilliant. You helped my cousin as a nurse in this situation. You were so helpful. Your bedside manner was second to none. I want to help you. What would be most helpful to you? Ask the single directly. I'm not so good at reading minds. I don't know what singles need, but I think about you all the time. I really would love to help you. What would be something that would be helpful to you? Would you like me to do some research for you, right? We have people that have lots of great qualities. Maybe you're a researcher and you're great at doing research. I'll make some phone calls for you. Okay. You know what? I'm an excellent writer. Would you let me help revise your profile, your resume? Maybe I can help you rewrite it so it sounds, we've got some fresher adjectives. It's a little bit more specific to what you're looking for. It doesn't sound so cliche like, the other 500 resumes we see. What can I do to help you, right? Maybe you're a photographer. I would be happy to take your picture and give you a free professional photo. That is something that I could do. I'm not a writer, I'm not a researcher, but I'm happy to give you a picture for free. Maybe you're not good at setting people up, but you know, I make a great chant. Want to come for Shabbos? Just come for Shabbos. I'd love to have your company. No strings attached. No boys are going to be invited. I'm not doing this to, ambush you. I just want to get to know you a little bit more. The best way to set up a single is to get to know them. And when there's no ulterior motives there, where I just want to get to know you because I just want to get to know you, there builds a relationship where you then can help your single better. And you're also able to just make them feel comfortable, accepted. There's nothing wrong with me because I'm single. I just happen to be single, right? So being able to use the God-given talents that we have in this community, because we have a lot, to be able to open our homes, use our talents, be a researcher, be a photographer, rewrite a profile. These are all areas in which we can help our singles work on our own marriages so that we can be role models for our children, or work on ourselves so we can be role model parents for our children, are all areas that we can work on together in order to help our children. And the last 2 points that I would like to mention before we open up for questions. Very often, young singles tend to run to the shadchan. And I always wonder, why haven't we spoken to basic friends and family? When I have single that I know very well and I care about deeply, if I have a spectacular boy, the girl that comes to mind is the girl that I know very well. Maybe not the girl that I met 5 minutes, because I happened to be maybe at a shadchan meet and I met her, but the girl that I know really well and I have her vested interest, those are the people that I'm really gonna kind of vote, push for, because that's who I know the best. So the first step would be, let's think about our basic friends and family and networking amongst ourselves. And that's why I want to put out a huge compliment to Shidduch Spot for creating this initiative and for creating a voice for the singles and for the parents and for the shadchanim, that we can work together as a team. And together, I feel, there's no limit at what, Klal Yisrael can do when we come together. We remove the judgments. We all have the same goal, and we're able to work for our singles to try to Mir Hashem build many, many Batei Nemanim. I would like to now open up for questions, and I know that I believe my husband's going to be fielding me some questions. So thank you, one and all, for having me. It's definitely been a tremendous honor and privilege. But honestly, I think the questions are going to be really, really important, so I can make sure that I'm addressing what's on everyone's minds.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I actually have some experience in asking Rachel questions. I did date her, and she was my personal dating coach. I can tell you it was very threatening, and I was completely outclassed in dating when I was dating Rachel. It was through sheer determination and grit that I was finally able to land her after her 219 other guys. I will continue now with some of the questions that have come in, some fantastic questions. Let's get started with the concept of fantasy that you brought up. What would you recommend to a parent who feels that their child is lost in fantasy and they want to get them grounded?
Okay, am I off mute? Okay, so first of all, I really recommend that parents sit down with their children, or children sit down with somebody, to really focus on what are their core needs. Now, we're not looking for a list of 55, but if we were able to sit down and say, what are your top 3 to 5 needs? And when I say needs, I mean, if I did not have any of these 3 to 5, I could not survive a relationship. Okay. What people typically do is they say, I want. And you know what? I've met a lot of people who married what they want, and it was very bad for them because their basic needs were not being met. Right. So, excuse me. So, for instance, the guy that I met who wanted a gorgeous girl, guess what? He married a gorgeous girl. And she was gorgeous from head to toe. And then he became very uncomfortable that everybody was always looking at his wife. Then he also became uncomfortable that he was emotionally disconnected from her, that she wasn't a growing person, and all she wanted to do was shop all day, right? And was constantly comparing her body and her nose and her hair and her nails to everybody else. And so he realized he got the gorgeous girl. He also didn't get a wife that he actually could connect to. And clearly he was divorced, and that created a problem. So focusing on what I really need, what I cannot live without in a relationship, is really crucial. And then I allow another category, which is wants. I would really want this. I would really want him to come from a certain home, to be a certain level of education, a certain kind of, maybe I prefer a certain city, right? But if I didn't have those things, I would be okay, right? And having that open conversation with your child as to what does a marriage actually look like? what qualities actually have to go into a marriage in order for a marriage to be successful is really, really crucial. This is a much longer conversation, but I hope that I could, just kind of touch upon it shortly.
Thank you. Question, you talked about exposure. What would you recommend to a girl who's struggling just simply getting dates, getting recommendations? It does happen. And where do they begin?
Okay, so I don't know what kind of background this girl is coming from, but I do recommend that we look at a few different avenues. I would love to look at her resume, and I'd like to see if there's anything in the wording of her resume that could be maybe turning somebody off, or we could be more specific and more clear about what she actually needs, and again, stress on needs in a relationship. I would want to look at if she's giving a picture. I'm not going into that today, but if she's giving that picture, I would want it to be clear and professional, not blurry, and make sure that it makes her look in the best light. I would also want to look at who are you dating? And if you're not dating, where have the suggestions come from in the past? Have you discussed this with family and friends? If you have you been open to potentially singles events or dating websites? And there are a variety of them, some of which entail a shadchan, some of which don't, right? Have you been open to different dating WhatsApp groups? Have you been flexible with the kinds of people that you are willing to say yes to, right? So there are many different areas that we can look at. And the biggest one I'd like to say is very often people are so busy looking for that right person. And my big mantra in coaching is fewer people are looking for being that right person. And everybody wants that happy person, that positive person, that good looking, smart, frum, capable person. And very often people are looking for the other to fill holes and gaps within themselves, as opposed to working on building themselves up and filling themselves up in the areas that they need. And I think that's a very, very important message. I'm not saying that that's specific to this person. I'm just saying as an option to drum up dates that we tend to attract the kind of energy that we're putting out. If we put out this energy of being sad and burnt out and unhappy, then it's going to be hard to attract that happy-go-lucky kind of person that we might actually want. So being mindful of all these different areas would just be a good place to get started.
Excellent. Well, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. I just thought that was a great answer. About the marriage is not a hospital point. What if somebody does genuinely struggle with a health issue, whether it's a mental health issue or a physical health issue? What is the appropriate way to fold that into the Shidduch experience? When should that be brought up? How should it be contextualized? Since you had said you can't leave it completely off the table, but obviously you don't want to lead with that. What would be your recommendation?
Okay, so I'm very happy that you bring that up, because very honestly, Shidduch don't come in perfect packages. Like we say, if anyone had to marry any or be read to any of the avos, none of us would say yes to any of the avos or imahos because of the packages and the families and the homes that they came with, right? So we all come with flaws, and that's completely fine. But I think when it comes to, mental or emotional illness, I think it's important to know that for the most part, most healthy people who come from healthy homes, even if they're suffering from a mental illness, are typically being medically managed. Okay. And so most, I can't say all, but most are able to lead very successful, very productive, very functional lives. So for instance, if somebody is on, a very low dose of Prozac because they are suffering from a little bit of a depression, it doesn't mean that they can't get married. Yes, that does need to be disclosed to the person they're dating. And I would recommend probably around 4th, 5th date is appropriate, where you let the person get to know you, but haven't been too invested that it's already so far gone that it would be unfair. That would probably be a good time to disclose it. And also to disclose, feel free to talk to my doctors. Here's the number of my therapist. Here's the number of my psychiatrist. You can feel free to discuss with them. You'd be surprised how many people are also suffering with their own things and also are not uncomfortable with it if it's being managed properly. Okay, there will be people that will not be comfortable with it. And for that, you have to say, they're not the right person. It's time to move on. I know it's painful, but only the wrong people will say no to you, and it's time to move on to find that right person. So making sure that you're getting that person to know, letting that person know you a bit. So I don't recommend putting that all forward before a first date, but making sure that soon on in 4th, 5th date, we're sharing that and being very open about letting someone speak to the doctor, letting it be managed, spoken to someone who knows the details, and then letting somebody make an honest decision about it. I think that's the healthiest way to go. But again, I just want to reiterate that many of these singles are living very healthy, productive. They have full-time jobs, they have social lives, they are wonderful people, and you probably don't even know that they are on some sort of medication to manage something, whether or not it's physical or mental, and they can lead very healthy lives.
Thank you. What is appropriate hishtadlus in shidduchim? So for a parent, they obviously not only have a general interest in seeing their child succeed and so on, but there's a lot of personal angst that brings up. And it's hard to gauge, when am I doing what's appropriate and healthy for my child? And when am I becoming a helicopter, or am I being overbearing or going well beyond what hashgacha would expect of me?
Okay, so this is a little bit tricky because it also depends on the age of your child. So for instance, younger children are going to want their parents more involved, whereas sometimes 30, 35 plus singles are going to go off more on their own and do a little bit more of their own checking and their own research, which is appropriate for that age. But I would say, and again, it's much more of a case by case kind of basis, but I would say is that you should do what feels comfortable. And then one more thing to just stretch yourself just a little bit. Once you start getting burnt out, overwhelmed, stressed out, you can't sleep, that's where I consider like, this is too much, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows your address, and he has all the capabilities possible to bring that shidduch to your door yesterday. He clearly didn't, which means that either you're not ready, the boy's not ready, Hashem doesn't think it's the right time. So we do need to do our hishtadlus. We have to, put together a nice resume, reach out to some shadchanim, reach out to some friends and family, try our best. And as our child gets older and isn't married, if that is the case, then we might want to choose to do a little bit more. Maybe we'll go onto a website. Maybe we'll, go to a singles event. Maybe we'll reach out and go out with guys that are a little bit different backgrounds than we had initially expected. And we can slowly do that as the process goes on if that child isn't married. But I don't think that this unhealthy, stressed out, burnt out, exhausted, chasing shadchanim, calling them 24/7 is a healthy way for you to go into a relationship, and B, for your child to see that my parent is so stressed out. Like, where's the emunah? Where's the bitachon? Where is the idea that I'm going to try my best, and then I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to let Hashem, do his thing. And yes, if a certain amount of time goes by, I've done my thing. I've called a bunch of people, I've put out a bunch of feelers, I put out the resume to a few different places, and if nothing's happening in the next couple of months, then I might choose in a few months to do that again. But to have that daily constant badgering and stress and pressure is really not healthy for anybody, specifically your child, because nobody makes healthy decisions coming from a pressured place. And we put that level of anxiety and pressure and stress on our child because they see what you're doing to marry them off. It's almost like they have a disease. Then when they actually go on a date, that pressure is so much that they're not making their decisions from the healthiest mindset.
Thank you. There are many members of our community that did not grow up in the world of shidduchim and from society and so on. And as their children grow older and begin to enter that world, it becomes this sort of labyrinth of explicit and implicit rules and rituals, and it can be really confusing. What would be your recommendation to a family such as this that's trying to figure out, how do we make our way from the start line to the goalposts?
Yes. Okay. So this is huge. Okay. I can think of many, many families that this applies to. So here's the reality that we don't want to face. Okay. Shidduchim is challenging for everybody. It doesn't matter your background. You could be a Baal Tshuva, you could be divorced, you can be single. It is a challenging experience, even when you get married at 19. For those few weeks or months that somebody is dating, it seems like the most challenging thing. Even when it goes smoothly, it is challenging. For the person that's going through it, for the family that's going through it, it is challenging. So the first thing I just want to state is, this is challenging across the board. I get this from a lot of Baalei Tshuva that feel that they are at some disadvantage because they didn't grow up in the system. And the only disadvantage that they have is maybe the knowledge of how the system typically runs. Other than that, we're all at a disadvantage because we're all struggling with this together, right? And the reason why we're all struggling with this together is because this is an area that requires an extra dose of emunah, an extra dose of bitachon, where we really have to let go, because we could be the smartest and the brightest and the wealthiest, and we can have the best child, and we can have everything going for them, and we can't find him. We can't find her. Why is it so challenging? But my child has everything going for them. That's right. That's exactly right. Because the most perfect shidduch is not the one that gets married first. The one that gets married first is the one that finds their zivug. I know this is hard to comprehend, but if we can lower the anxiety level of those that feel so inadequate in the system, we could recognize that we're all in this together. It's difficult for all of us, whether your child is younger, older, bal tshuva, divorced, single. I have many friends that came from divorced homes that got married way before me. How is that possible? Hashem decided it to be so. And so Hashem's asking us to let go of control. And it is so challenging. We all struggle with this. My parents struggle with this. I struggle with this. We all struggle with letting go of control, which is why doing our baseline hishtadlus and maybe stretching ourselves a little bit outside of our comfort zone to do appropriate and maybe appropriate plus hishtadlus is a good idea. But once we start getting into this place where we're so anxious, we're making our kids anxious, we can't sleep at night, that's not hishtadlus. That's just anxiety and stress for anxiety and stress sake. That's not actually productive. And, I do coach parents all the time. I coach, parents who come from FFB homes, parents who come from, Bali Tshuva homes. I coach the gamut. The people that get married are those that find the right person. That might be today. It might be tomorrow. It might be that your time is in 6 months or 2 years. And obviously I want for everybody that it should be sooner than later. Unfortunately, that's not what's necessarily best, because I didn't say that. That's what Akash Baruch Hu decided, right? So, I coached a guy who is coming from a broken home. His parents are Baalei Tshuva. He's coming from a broken home, saw a lot of trauma and pain growing up. And he's angry. He's so angry why he's not married. He has everything going for him except for his parents that ruined his shidduch opportunities. And he's just bitter and burnt out and 33 and nothing's working. And the real problem there that he finally took a long time for him to accept is that if he got married tomorrow, he wouldn't make anybody very happy with his attitude, right? Until he's able to accept that even though he came from a difficult background, he has the power to work on himself and to change those realities in the home that he builds in the future. But being angry and bitter and burnt out, it's probably a good thing that Hashem is keeping him single now, so that he's able to work through these things, so that he can get to a better place in order that he can attract that highest, what I call that highest level shidduch, that highest level love, which is when you're your best version of yourself, you're able to attract that best version that matches you. And don't we all want that for our children? Don't we all want that for our singles? Would we rather them just get married right away when they're angry and bitter and probably going to make someone else angry and bitter? Is that what we want? Better that we should take a step back, take a deep breath, get our singles in the healthiest place, get ourselves in a healthy mindset, and be able to help our children have the best marriage and relationship that they possibly can, starting with themselves.
Okay, it looks like this is going to have to be our last question. Okay. So let's go back to the point that you brought up about the breakdown of the family unit challenges. As you mentioned, many of your clients fall into those categories. I believe the 3 categories were people who came from a divorced home, from a home in which there was a challenging marriage, or where one spouse had died. What would you recommend to a single, or the parent of a single, who finds themselves in that situation? What would be sort of your checklist for those singles of the things they should be doing to make sure that they can protect or shield themselves from the potential negative effects of that dynamic?
Okay, so we did touch upon this a little bit, but I'll just to add to that. So it's very important that you make sure that you are the best parent that you can be, that your child is getting a positive view of relationships and marriage, even if you are not married. So for instance, I've had many singles tell me that my mother's a very happy person, but the underlying message that I got throughout life is, you'll probably be happier alone. What do you need it for? Now, she never said that to me outright, but it was kind of that underlying kind of core value trait that I always got, what we call, shorish, like what a child gets from a parent is not what they say, but what they actually do. And that's what she got from that parent. So making sure that even if you're not married, that you're giving your child a healthy mindset and focus on that marriage is a good thing. Relationships can be healthy. Even if it didn't work out for me, it can work out for you. right? We're also interested in building healthy conflict resolution skills, healthy skills of resiliency, like we talked about, healthy boundaries. I recently just had a client who was at a singles event and walked up to somebody and said, do you go to therapy? How many times a week do you go to therapy? How much do you pay for your therapist? And what exactly are you working on with your therapist? This was the opening line that she gave to a guy that she met at a singles event, right? And now clearly there's no chance for a relationship there when somebody's doing that. So helping our children with their social skills, with their boundaries, with their conflict resolution, making sure that there are healthy, fully functioning adults, and that their view on relationships and marriage are healthy and positive, and that marriage can be a good thing, even if you yourself are not married. Did I answer that clearly?
Great.
Okay. And moving forward, I would recommend that you encourage your children to spend time with different families, so that even though they didn't grow up in that home, that they're able to spend a Shabbos meal by this one, and a cousin and an aunt and a neighbor and a friend, where they're able to see how husband and wife talk to each other, how there is healthy back and forth and disagreement in a respectful way, so they can learn those qualities from the parents, from a healthy home. Okay.
Hey, thank you so much.
In quick summary, I'm just going to quickly just sum up those tips so we all remember. Healthy mindset. Okay, number 1. Number 2, being in the moment, being there for our children. Number 3, we don't have a single crisis. We have a breakdown of the family unit. Number 4, marriage is not a hospital. Take care of everything beforehand. And number 5, tefillah, which is so huge. And as a community, all that we can do with all of our talents and all of our abilities, and a wonderful, wonderful organization such as Shidduch, which, you know, Mrs. Singer has put so much heart and soul into this, and all the shadchanim that are dedicated to the success of this organization. I think that it's unstoppable what we can do if we work together. Thank you so much, and have a good night to all.